I was 62 the first time a stranger told me my blood was rare. Not special rare. Special you embroider on a hand towel. Rare is a word people speak softly, the way nurses lower their voices around sleeping patients. It was the first Thursday of November, the kind of cold New England evening that turns breath to lace under the streetlights and makes the Baptist church's stained glass windows look like warm squares you might want to step into. I had just come from the community center, where the blood drive set up twice a year, between the line dancing class and the quilting group. They give you a juice box and a packet of cookies and a sticker that says, "I did something good," which is generally all the celebration a decent deed needs. I hadn't donated in years. My iron ran low after Mark died, and then, during those first foggy anniversaries, I forgot to do most things that weren't in reach of habit. But I'm a widow who likes to keep a promise to herself, so I lay on the makeshift cot and watched my blood thread into the plastic bag, a slow red snake, and thought, as I always do, about my mother's hands. They were narrow and nimble, the hands of a homeward woman who could snip a hanging thread with her teeth and tuck it where it belonged. My mother said our family were Irish through and through. She said it like a weather report, factual and a little chilly but steady. "We are the sort of people you can count on," she'd say, and then she would fold a towel with the corners meeting, exactly as if that proved the point. When the phone rang after 10 that night, I was sorting photographs at the kitchen table. Mark in waders, Mark under the half-built deck with the drill between his knees, Mark with his hand in the air at our daughter's college graduation as if he were halting traffic. I don't pick up numbers I don't recognize. Scam calls called for a modern sort of politeness, silence, but it rang again, and then a third time, and on the fourth I answered, if only to teach someone what decency sounded like. "Mrs. Keene?" A woman's voice, quick but pitched low. "Eleanor? This is Dr. Maya Ortiz. I'm the medical director for the blood bank at St. Brigid's." I sat up straighter without meaning to. Doctors are like hymns. You fall into the posture you learned at 12. "Everything okay with my donation?" I asked, already picturing a mislabeled bag and someone dying because my handwriting had slouched. "Your donation is fine," she said. "It's more than fine. Mrs. Keene, are you feeling well tonight?" "Yes," I said, half offended because feeling well has always been the currency of my stubbornness. "Why?" "We have a neonatal patient in critical condition," she said gently. "A baby with severe hemolytic disease of the newborn. We've run through our inventory, and the antigen profile the baby needs is rare. Your donation typed as a perfect match, down to some very uncommon antigens. We don't have any other units like yours. I know this is unusual, but I'm calling to request emergency consent to draw another unit tonight if you're willing. We can have a mobile nurse meet you, or I can send a car." I tried to picture my blood moving from my arm into a baby I had never seen. I thought of my daughter, Claire, the night she was born, panicked and shining and indignant, her little fists like knots you'd need patience to untie. I thought of the times I wished after Mark's heart attack that there had been something in my pantry you could stir into water to keep a person alive. "Of course," I said too loudly, "whatever you need." "Thank you," she said, and the thank you sounded like steam leaving a kettle, that first relieved laugh of breath. "We'll send a car in 10 minutes. If you have any medical conditions, we should know." "I'm boring," I said. "Postmenopausal, on calcium and common sense." She laughed once and agreed to see me soon. When I hung up, the house felt suddenly incorrect, as if the furniture were facing the wrong direction. I put on my wool coat, the one with the broken top button I still pretended I'd fix, and pulled my hair into the bun that felt honest on my head. On the way out, I checked the stovetop twice, and then once more, because that last checking is how mothers have always already saved the world. The hospital smelled like winter floors, disinfectant, and treaded in snow. Dr. Ortiz met me in the small waiting room at the end of a hallway where the linoleum gave up and the soft lighting took over. She was younger than I'd expected, and her face held that practiced mixture of concentration and welcome you see on people who spend their days asking strangers for permission to help them. "Mrs. Keene," she said, offering her hand, "thank you for answering so fast. We've drawn blood for a cross-match, and it's as clean a match as we could hope for. Your blood is—" She hesitated, hunting for the wording. "It's rare. You have an antigen-negative phenotype that's exceptionally uncommon in our population." "Irish uncommon?" I asked, trying for lightness. "I was told we were bog-standard Irish. Red stew and stubbornness." Her eyes crinkled. "The antigens I'm talking about, Kell, Duffy, some in the MNS system, they're inherited, and the pattern you have is very unusual here. It's also consistent with a particular combination we occasionally see in families. I don't mean to pry. I want to be respectful of privacy laws, but I am going to ask a question, and you can tell me to mind my business." "Ask." "I have never found use for coyness in hallways where linear fluorescents hum at a frequency that suggests honesty. Is there any chance you were adopted, or that there's mixed ancestry in your family that maybe wasn't discussed?" She kept her voice very soft. "Again, your medical information is yours, but the baby's antigen profile is remarkably close to yours. In this line of work, we see patterns, and sometimes patterns are people who haven't met yet." There it was, a strange tenderness disguised as a lab result. My mother's face, powder on her cheeks and soap behind her ears, flashed up in my mind. She had a way of answering a question with a new topic and a clean dish towel. "My mother said we were Irish," I repeated, my voice duller now. "She said it often enough. I heard the hinge creak of a door. She wasn't going to open." Dr. Ortiz nodded. "We'll set up for the draw," she said, letting the subject find its shelf. "I'll stay with you." They sat me in a small room with a recliner that looked like it had comforted more fathers fainting than grandmothers donating, and a nurse named Tasha took my vitals and brought me warm blankets that smelled like a sensible laundromat. "Doctor." Ortiz leaned against the counter and explained, in simple words, the baby's situation. The mother's antibodies attacking the baby's red blood cells. The baby's bilirubin climbing a mountain no baby should climb. The way sick infants turn gravity into enemy number one. What the child needed was blood that wouldn't call attention to itself inside that tiny system. "Your blood won't make a fuss," she said, and I could have loved her for that phrase alone. While my veins did what they were trained to do, I studied the doctor's face. She had a small scar at her eyebrow and a steady way of breathing even when she was pausing between sentences. When she squeezed my hand after the second unit, I felt the compressive strength of someone who held exhausted people up because they forgot to ask to sit. "Will you tell me how the baby does?" I asked. "Only if it's allowed. I can be content never knowing a name, but not knowing if the day continued to exist is harder." "I'll ask the family for permission to share updates," she said. "If they consent, I'll call." Then she added, "Like someone offering a different kind of chair, in case the one you're on isn't the right height. Our social worker sometimes acts as a mutual friend when there are questions on both sides, if and only if everyone wants it." They bandaged my elbow with a piece of tape that put my skin in the most flattering light it's seen in years. When they discharged me near midnight, the hospital was quieter, but it didn't feel empty. It felt like a person holding its breath between prayers. Dr. Ortiz walked me to the sliding doors. The cold air shocked my lungs into gratitude. At home, I made toast and tea because the world is only ever as good as its habits. I told Mark, whose absence still has the decency to sit near the window most days, that I had given blood to a baby and that I might have lied to myself for a long time without meaning to. He didn't answer, of course, but a tiny bubble rose from the bottom of the kettle. It could have been astonishment or approval or physics, and I took what I needed from it. The phone didn't ring in the morning. I cleaned the kitchen to the bones and took the winter blankets down from the top shelf and argued with myself about the hallway paint color that never looked the way it did on the chip. I checked my phone so often I ended up plugging it in at noon. At 3, it lit up. Mrs. Keene, Dr. Ortiz again. The way someone says your name the second time carries a new information. You belong to a story now. Can you talk? Yes. I sat down on the stairs because stairs are good for news. They keep you from wandering into the wrong room. The baby is stable, she said, and I exhaled in a way that must have startled the cat. Your units worked beautifully. The family gave consent for me to share that much. She hesitated. They also gave us permission to ask you something. It feels personal, and you should feel free to say no. But the mother, she asked whether there's any possibility you would be open to being contacted by a hospital social worker as a third party. She has questions. Your rare antigen profile matches hers unusually closely. The lab noticed these things are inherited, and we think there may be a familial link. If not, it's a coincidence science can live with. But if yes, there are conversations you might both want. I thought of the word I had worn like an apron my whole life. Irish. I thought of my mother's tidy lies and the way we tidy people sometimes confuse privacy with love. I thought of a baby saved by blood that matched more than it had any right to. I said, yes, I'm open. Good, Dr. Ortiz said, relief running under the syllable like a river under ice. Our social worker, M, will call. We'll do this carefully. When I hung up, I laughed once. A puff of noise that didn't know where else to go, and then I cried, not for grief exactly, but for adjustment. The house absorbed the sound without complaint. I made tea again, because if you are going to let the scaffolding move, you should be standing on something reliable when it does. In my mother's drawer, tucked under the blouses that were too good for anything but Sundays, there had always been an envelope marked correspondence, which is a word that requires both pomp and a straight back. After she died, I kept the envelope closed because I loved her enough to honor her privacy and feared her enough to maintain the myth she worked so hard to knit. That night, I set the envelope on the table and listened to the stilling house until the furnace clicked on. Then I opened it. Inside there were 3 postcards from County Kerry, a receipt for a baptismal gown purchased from a shop that had been a pharmacy in my childhood, and a wedding boutique by the time I was a wife, and a letter with no stamp, dated March 1960, written in a young woman's careful hand. I cannot do this, it read. I cannot say yes to your proposal that we pretend Georgia never happened. The agency says the baby will be better off. Maybe. I don't know. I wake up and I don't know. You want me to move to Boston, marry quickly, and carry on. If we do, I need you to understand that some things will be unsaid and some will be thrown away. I am holding the child now. She is small. She did not ask. I don't know how to live with what I am about to do. The signature was a name I had never heard spoken aloud by anyone I loved. I read it 3 times to be sure ink said what my mind refused to pick up. Eileen Carmichael. Then I read the letter twice more, this time remembering that my mother wore sorrow like a cardigan she never could get quite comfortable in. I understood nothing and everything at once. It is a complicated kindness to keep a child safe by lying to her about where the safety came from. It is not unforgivable. It is just hard to carry. The phone rang again at 6:30, the time of day when news seems legitimate. Mrs. Keene? A new voice, warm and elastic. This is M. I'm a social worker at St. Bridget's. Do you have a minute? I want, with your consent, to act as a bridge. Nothing goes anywhere unless both sides say so. There are moments the heart recognizes because it has been watching the horizon for years. I have a minute, I said, and the minute turned into an hour in which we talked about the ways identity gets folded and ironed and put away, and the ways it can be taken out and worn without making a scene. The mother's name is Anna, M said at the end, with the cautious pride of someone handing over a newborn. She's 29. She declined to share her last name, which is her right. She told me you can have her number if you want it. She wanted me to tell you something, just this. Please tell her thank you, and tell her my grandmother's name was Eileen." Between that sentence and the one I said next sat a silence that reorganized me from the inside. "You can share my number," I answered, and put my hand, without realizing, over the place where I imagined my blood ran most faithfully. "Tell her to call when she's ready." That night I put the letter back in the envelope, but I didn't tuck it away. I set it on the mantel with a small jar of the barley sugar candies my mother loved. I told the empty room something I had never said out loud. Georgia. The word clicked in my mouth like a wooden bead passing through a child's fingers on a rosary. I did not know what it meant yet, but I knew it had been there all along, threading my life with a color I had never named. The house slept. I did not. Somewhere downtown, a baby's blood moved quietly without making a fuss. In another house, a young woman sat in the amber light of a lamp, her phone in her hand, her grandmother's name in her mouth. The line between us, once a line of imagined Irish stubbornness, had shifted. It was now vascular. You can't see those lines. You can feel them if you sit still long enough and admit that your body was telling a story your papers never dared to print. I come from a generation taught to value privacy the way one values a good wool coat, as protection and identity, a garment and an emblem all at once. We learned to shut doors softly, to cover what wrinkled, to eat the burned piece of toast and call it our preference. Even now, I don't much like the spilling of a secret for its own sake, but there is privacy born from modesty, and then there is the other kind, the kind that breeds in shadows and makes bones ache with unlived truths. When Em called back the next evening, her voice had the brisk mercy of a person who knows how to open a window in a room that smells of dust. "Just to check in," she said. "No pressure. Anna is home with her daughter. The baby is stable and feisty, which is an adjective I am legally allowed to use because it has no protected health information attached. She'd like to speak with you when you're ready." I was ready, though I wouldn't have confessed it if readiness had demanded a parade. "Yes," I said, "give her my number. Tell her I'm not a collector of anything but cookbooks and that I'm not looking to rewrite her family's story. I'm simply looking to read my own footnotes." 10 minutes later, my phone trembled in my palm. "Hi," a voice said, and the layer beneath the word carried something I recognized, an educated attempt at steadiness. "This is Anna." I didn't know how to begin, so that was me, beginning. "I'm Eleanor," I said, and then, because it's important to tell people what you are willing to be called in case your formal name is a hill no one needs to climb, "Nora is fine." "Nora," she repeated, and somehow put respect into a single vowel. "I wanted to say thank you first, for the blood, for answering your phone in the dark, for letting Em play matchmaker with the strangest kinship I can imagine." "You're welcome," I said, "and thank you for consenting to the call. Some people hold doors open, some people are doors. You've been both." She laughed, a small, startled sound. "My grandmother said things like that." "Was your grandmother's name Eileen?" It was a question you shouldn't ask without warnings and paper towels at hand. But you also cannot walk around an elephant forever in a living room and call yourself a guest. The pause that followed was short but deep. "Yes," she said, "Eileen Fitzgerald. She died when I was 15. She used to tell me I had stubborn blood. She said it with a smile, but she meant it as preparation." "I found a letter," I said, "that may connect me to her, at least to a version of her. It's a long story. It involves Georgia." "I was born in Georgia," she said softly. "There is a way truth behaves at the moment it is recognized without being named. The air in a room changes the way it does before thunder. We didn't do genealogy on the phone that night. We didn't move furniture or adopt ourselves into each other's histories with pen strokes and cake. We simply made a plan for tea. Not coffee," she teased lightly. "I'll make both," I said. "I've been a mother too long to offer only one solution." Sunday came dressed in a fragile sun. I baked an orange almond loaf because citrus is bravery you can eat. I set the table with the wedding china, consciously ridiculous for a Sunday, but stubbornness needs its outlets. and I put the letter in an envelope under the salt cellar, like a mouse you keep hidden until it is tame. When Anna knocked, I saw first the coat, practical, a navy that belonged in a city winter, then the face, open like a door on a day when the air is merely itself. She carried her baby in a fabric sling, velvet hair slicked to a head that had already made a case for living. When I reached to take the diaper bag, she let me. Trust offered in small objects is the beginning of any truce worth keeping. "Come in," I said, and the house echoed weariness and welcome in equal measure. "Shoes off or on is entirely up to you." We did that motion women do when navigating each other's kitchens for the first time. A sort of domestic semaphore of elbows and glances, a careful ballet around a kettle that may as well be a communion cup. The baby, Lucia, I learned, snuffled and set my heartbeat to something older and more useful than my thoughts. We sat, tea and coffee both, like I promised, because offerings are cheaper than regret. "I brought this," Anna said, reaching into her bag and pulling out a thin folder. "Medical stuff. The lab typed me after the delivery because of the antibodies. They told me I have a very rare antigen combination, and they took a photo of the panel because it was textbook interesting." She rolled her eyes affectionately at the phrase. "We are our profession's clichés until we make fun of them." I laid the photocopy beside my own, which Dr. Ortiz had printed for me after I donated the second time for the baby's exchange transfusion. On the left, columns of plus signs and minus signs. On the right, the same columns, the same signs, a mirror with a few scratches. My heart did a small, private acrobatics routine, a hop none of my bones permitted in public. "Blood isn't proof," I said, "but blood is a loud hint." "It is," she said, and then smiled carefully. "I took a consumer DNA test when I was 25. The results said my maternal ancestry had a slice of Irish and a long, unhelpfully named thing labeled Northwestern European. My mother, Patricia, was born in Savannah in 1960. She knew she was adopted. She never wanted to look. I have a family," she'd say, "and I have the people who raised me. Those are sentences that do not require conjunctions." Then, when she was dying cancer, she told me her adopted mother, Eileen, had once said she left a piece of her heart in Massachusetts as a young woman. She thought it was a man. Now I wonder if it was more complicated. I took a breath that felt like stepping onto a new stair I had only seen in photographs. My mother kept a letter from someone named Eileen, dated March 1960. There is a procedural pain in it I cannot look away from. She writes of an agency, of a baby, of Boston, of a transaction, of silence. She married my father in June of that year. They lived in a rented duplex with a landlord we called Mr. Yes, because he said no to everything. I have a birth certificate that says I was born at Beth Israel in December 1960. There are 2 registered witnesses whose names do not show up on the internet. I'm good with rotary phones. I am not good with ghosts in spreadsheets. We didn't touch the letter then. Some documents require choreography. Instead, we submitted ourselves to our body's wisdom. I asked Anna if she was hungry. She laughed with relief. We ate the orange loaf, and then toast with butter, because feasts that repair you aren't the complicated ones. They're the ones that taste like your mouth remembers safety. Halfway through our second cups, the baby woke and announced that she would prefer to live in a world where milk comes on time. Anna's hands were competent and tender, one of those equalities hard to achieve in any art. I looked away without removing my attention. Respect is a form of looking away that doesn't abandon the room. "Do you want me to hold her after?" I asked quietly. "Please," she said, then glanced at me like she wanted to say something she wasn't sure how to measure. "I have a question I don't know how to soften. Do you think, if this is what it seems, we are kin?" I offered. She nodded. "I think we are adjacent to that word," I said. "Maybe we are standing in its doorway. Whether we walk in depends on papers and patience and the dead's capacity to forgive us for reading their mail." She smiled, grateful. M said you spoke like a person who has had to lay down the law to a casserole. That is, in fact, my spiritual gift. We did the next right thing, which is never glamorous but frequently correct. We called M on speaker. We asked about the legal pathway for adoption records in our state. We learned there are keys one can request if one can prove one has a legitimate familial interest and no intention of suing anyone into the grave. We made lists. I wrote in the margin of my list, "Remember to breathe." It was not metaphorical. At 4 o'clock, the sun began to defect to the other side of the neighborhood. I walked Anna to her car and tucked an extra blanket around the baby, because we become our grandmothers when it dips below 40. Before she got in, she touched my sleeve. "Whatever this becomes," she said, "I want you to know that when the nurse hung the bag of your blood, my mother, Patricia, put her hand on it. She said, 'Thank you,' to a person she had not met. She died before she could teach me many things. She taught me that one." "Tell her she's welcome," I said, and then heard what I'd said and felt my face do a thing I hadn't authorized. "I mean, tell yourself? The grammar is hard when vocabulary is a map whose legend you mislaid in 1960. Anna laughed in the good way. "We'll invent a grammar," she said. "For now we have nouns, baby, blood, letter, tea." After they left, the house resumed being a house, a system of walls designed to hold heat and narrative. I washed the cups slowly, because some movement is prayer when you do it without hurrying. Then I took the envelope from under the salt cellar and reread the letter. I forced myself to do the ridiculous and the brave. I wrote Eileen's name on a clean index card and taped it inside the pantry door. My private cathedral, post-it size. The weeks that followed were administrative and holy. M filed a petition with the court to unseal certain non-identifying records. Dr. Ortiz, not our doctor anymore, really, but the friend whose day job is miracles, wrote a letter confirming the medical interest in our familial linkage, which is a phrase that only makes sense if you have spent too much time in labs. We ordered certified copies of the documents I'd been assured required no such respect. We waited. Waiting, it turns out, tastes like ginger tea and old magazines and walking the same stretch of sidewalk, exactly 15 minutes after breakfast every day, because marking time with feet is a palatable way to mark it. Results do not arrive in the ways stories promise they will. There was no grand delivery. There was a plain envelope with a return address that pretended it didn't exist. M called me before I could open it. I put the phone on speaker, the letter on the table, Anna on a three-way call that felt like a well-behaved séance. "Open," M said. I slit the envelope with the old paring knife that has more of my life on it than any therapist. Inside were 2 sheets. A summary, clinical, noting that in March 1960, a female infant was relinquished at St. Mary's Home for Mothers in Savannah, Georgia, by a woman named Eileen Fitzgerald, aged 19, who later relocated to Massachusetts to live with an aunt and secure employment. There was also a notation that the father was not listed, which is how women were made to keep men anonymous when men wished to be. The adoptive parents' names were redacted, but the place of adoption was Boston. The infant's birth name, Nora. The second sheet was thinner, a facsimile of a telegram dated December 1960. Placement complete. Infant now known as Eleanor Carmichael, in custody of Frank and Margaret Carmichael, sent from an agency number to a Massachusetts court file. Carmichael is a name I knew only from a box of photographs I never could place in our tree. I heard Anna inhale. M said nothing because training is a protective layer over the part of the heart that leaks. "I was born a Nora," I said aloud, as if saying it would unlock a door on a hallway where I had always been a polite guest. My mother named me for who I turned out to be by accident, or by joke, or by I ran out of conjunctions. Eileen named me Nora. It was not fireworks. It was a coat that suddenly fit across the shoulders when you hadn't realized you'd been walking hunched. It was blood doing nothing dramatic. It was blood doing what it is built to do, Reveal, connect, carry, not make a fuss. We did not rush to define each other. We decided on manageable words. Relative is a dignified noun. Friend is not a demotion. We met every Sunday for a month. I showed Anna how to make the soup my mother never gave me the recipe for. She taught me how to swaddle the baby with less fabric and more confidence. We visited St. Brigid's and brought the nurses a ridiculous quantity of good chocolate. Dr. Ortiz, busy in a way that is entirely different from distracted, hugged us both and did not say, "I told you so," which I will count for the rest of my life as an act of humility I intend to emulate. Mark's photograph remains on the mantel because dead spouses are not replaced by living relatives discovered by antigen panel. My mother's portrait sits beside him now. I speak to them both sometimes. I do not ask permission. I offer explanation. You did what you knew. I say to my mother's posed smile, I am doing what I know. The Venn diagram is friendly in places. At Christmas, Anna brought Lucia in a knit cap too serious for her eyebrows. We took a picture, me, Anna, the baby, the tea as a fourth guest. We labeled it in black ink because if we've learned anything from the last half-century, it is that captions matter. First winter, Anna wrote, and then under it in my mother's neat, surprising script she added, family. Blood, I have learned, is not a synonym for obligation. It is an invitation. Some of us have RSVP'd to the wrong events for decades because the invitations were misaddressed. A rare blood type brought a doctor to my phone and a baby to my imagination and a young woman to my table. It brought a letter out of a drawer and a name out of a telegram. It changed nothing about what I owe the world: civility, courage, cookies. It changed the way I introduce myself to myself. I have begun a practice. Once a week I put out 2 cups, one big, one small, and I pour tea into both and name aloud the women who held me up, in ignorance and in knowledge. Margaret, who told a tidy lie for a messy love. Eileen, who wrote a hard letter from Savannah and chose a name I would return to 62 years later. Anna, who learned to be brave in a hospital hallway. Em and Maya, who made ethics feel like a warm room. And Claire, my daughter, who raised an eyebrow at me and said, "Of course you were always a Nora," which is precisely the kind of generosity adult children bestow when they realize their parents are people with plot twists. I do not require the world to applaud this. I require only that my pantry door hold the index card with a name written on it in thick pen, the name that belongs to the woman who started this branch with a letter and a broken heart. On the days I feel foolish for needing names, I open the door and let the spices smile back. Coriander, cumin, Eileen. Everyday things, necessary things, things that make ordinary food go from bland to something that tastes like home. If you're listening for a moral, I have only this. Answer your phone when the call is kind, and be a door that knows how to open without slamming anyone's past. The rest is blood doing the patient, unglamorous work of being human together.